Hi guys, it's Zafra and today we're doing my October wrap-up. So I ended up reading 18 books in October. It's a lot, so I feel like we should get right into it. So the first book I read was Astrophysics for People in a Hurry by Neil deGrasse Tyson. Now this is a book that has been on my to-be-read pile for a very long time. I've always been really into astrophysics. In fact, one of my favorite places in the world is the Sharjah Planetarium. If you guys have been there, if you haven't, you should definitely go. But anyways, so astrophysics is a subject I've always been really interested in, and this book has always been up on my reading pile, but I never ended up getting to it until last month. I spent basically all the time in between reading it just bombarding my family with astrophysics information. I taught my dad about dark matter. At first he wasn't very interested, but then eventually I got all of them to get excited about it, which was also really fun. A slight disclaimer if you're looking to read this book: it does require at least a basic understanding of physics. So I did physics in school as well until my A-levels, so I was able to understand quite a bit, but I still had to rack my sister's brain for some of the information. So if you're going into this, just a fair warning that there is quite some heavy physics in here, so yeah. In that case, I would recommend you also check out Astrophysics for Young People in a Hurry, which is supposed to be a more simpler version of the book, so you can kind of read them both in series. And I gave Astrophysics for People in a Hurry 5 out of 5 stars. So the next book I read was The Simple Wild by K.A. Tucker, and I gave this 5 stars. In fact, The Simple Wild is one of my favorite reads I think I have read throughout this entire pandemic, because it was such an absorbing read, both in the settings and the characters. K.A. Tucker has such hearty writing that you just get sucked in. I feel like this book was a huge comfort for me, not just because of the Alaskan environment and how different it is from the world that we live in, or that I live in. And I think it's also just sinking into the problems of other characters that really does give this an edge. Also, Jonah and Kala, the main leads, their banter is so fun to read. I could read it for books upon books. So that was Simple Wild by K.A. Tucker. What was the next book? So the next book I read is the first book in the Shadow and Bone trilogy by Leigh Bardugo, which is Shadow and Bone. So after reading Six of Crows about a month or two ago, I decided I wanted to read all the books in the Grishaverse. If you don't know what the Grishaverse is, it is the world that Leigh Bardugo has created. It has 3 different series. She has set 3 different series in this world and multiple novellas. So I'm slowly making my way through all of the books. There's quite a lot of them, and this is the first one in the Grishaverse. Now, Shadow and Bone is a trilogy that I have been eyeing since I was like 13. This has been a book that has been famous on BookTube and the Bookternet for a very long time, but for some reason I never ended up picking them up, and I finally felt like this was the time. So I gave Shadow and Bone a 4 out of 5 star rating because I would say it was a solid read, but there wasn't much that happened in the book. In fact, I think the letdown for this particular book was the main character, Alina. I did not find Alina any charming whatsoever. I didn't find her as interesting. I feel like we spent a huge chunk of the book with just Alina idling around, which I wish was not the case, but unfortunately that's what I ended up reading. So the next book I read is The Tailor, also by Leigh Bardugo, and this is a short novella that is set right after the events in Shadow and Bone, and I gave it a 3 out of 5 star rating. Unfortunately, I can't really give a synopsis for this because that would be a spoiler, but I did enjoy getting a little glimpse into a character that I did not think would go the way she did go. She or he. Just to keep the suspense. So the next book I read was Binti by Nnedi Okorafor, and I gave this a 4 out of 5 star rating. First of all, the cover of this book is gorgeous. I absolutely love this cover. But beyond that, I actually have a joint review of Binti, the first 2 books in the Binti trilogy, on my blog. But nevertheless, I will talk a little bit about Binti here. Binti intrigued me because I was first introduced to Binti through Goodreads when it first came out, And at the time, I wasn't that into science fiction, so I kind of brushed off the recommendation. But with the slew of anti-racist recommendations that were coming through, Binti is a recommendation that came up as well. And I thought, okay, it seems like a great idea to check out this book. And I did, and I absolutely loved it. If you haven't heard of Nedi Okorafor and her Binti books, I highly recommend you check them out. I have never read anything like these books. It is definitely heavily science fiction, I would say, and mathematical. But I think that just goes to show how great storytelling can be improved by a medium like that. So the next book I read was a graphic novel, and I loved it so much, and that is American Born Chinese by Jean Luen Yang. I don't know if that's how you pronounce his name, but American Born Chinese is a book that has been on my graphic novel to be read pile for a while. Primarily because it is a colored graphic novel, because I tend to read a lot of black and white graphic novels, so I thought this would be a good change of pace. And I was right. I absolutely loved American Born Chinese. I gave it a 5 out of 5 star rating. I didn't expect to enjoy it as much, but I think because I had low expectations, by the end of the book, I was basically blown away. If you haven't heard of American Born Chinese, we follow 3 different stories that seem to be vastly different. But then ultimately the ways they connect at the end just leave your mind blown. I absolutely loved these books. The primary theme, I would say, is cultural identity and coming into a cultural identity, especially when you're an immigrant or you're basically in a place where you feel that you're not accepted for your culture. Also, the art is just so fun to read. Like, Jean Luen Yang has a talent for making the pages just leap at you. It was so easy, and it was so easy to imagine these scenes playing out. So the next book I have here is the second book in the Wild series by K.A. Tucker, and that is Wild at Heart. Wild at Heart actually came out earlier this year, so it's quite a recent release. I gave this a 5 star rating as well. Having read The Simple Wild, I was quite skeptical about reading a second book in the series because number one, it's a contemporary. And contemporary books I have read that have sequels tend to kind of let me down, wherein like the primary book, like The Simple Wild, I really enjoyed and loved. And then I would read the second book and it would let me down, and then I would be put off from the whole story and all of the characters. So I was kind of worried about reading Wild at Heart, but having read it, I can only say I love these characters even more, and the setting as well. Obviously, since this is a sequel, I can't give too much of a synopsis, but I can say with my whole heart that it carries the same hearty messages that Simple Wild does. Also, it's just so much fun to read Caleb's perspective. The next book I have here was a huge reread, and that is Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows by J.K. Rowling. I have been meaning to reread Deathly Hallows for a very long time. So I tend to reread a lot of Harry Potter books every year. So I would say Sorcerer's Stone or Philosopher's Stone, the first book, is the one that I reread every single year without fail. Most of the other books in the series, I don't really reread them. But Deathly Hallows is the one that I haven't reread literally since like 2015. So it's been 5 years since I reread it, and I was rewatching some of the movies, and I felt like I completely forgot Deathly Hallows, so I had to reread it. So it was one rainy week, and I thought, you know what, this is the moment, and I picked it up. I think I forgot how emotional it was to kind of come to the close of this story, both in film and in book form, because I don't feel like I ever said goodbye to Harry Potter, because I just kept rereading the books and rewatching the movies and going back to Tumblr and Pinterest when I felt like I needed a dose of Harry Potter. But rereading Deathly Hallows and rewatching Deathly Hallows Part 1 and 2, it kind of made me feel like I was saying goodbye again, which was very sad. Also, I am going to be honest, rereading this has fortified the fact that this is not my favorite in the series. I feel like this book could have been executed better in that it could have been longer. And I know you're looking at me like, Zafar, this is already insanely huge. But yeah, I feel like this, like, when you look at the movies, like, Deathly Hallows Part 1 is like all of this, and then Deathly Hallows Part 2 is literally just like this last bit. Like when you think of it that way, the story could have been more fleshed out towards the end. I feel like there's definitely loose ends that could have been tied up, but yeah. But overall, it was just really fun getting back into character with these, with Ron, Hermione, and Harry, and I absolutely loved it. Obviously, I gave that a 5 out of 5 stars. No Harry Potter book has gotten any less since I started reading them and rereading them. So the next book I've got here is a really fun read, and that is My Lady Jane by Cynthia Hand, Brody Ashton, and Jody Meadows. Number one, this is a book that I had never thought I would pick up. It blew up a while ago, I would say 2-3 years ago. My Lady Jane and the whole Lady Jane-ies books were really everywhere. Everywhere I looked, it was My Lady Jane. And I never thought I would pick them up because, I'm going to be honest here, I've never really been a huge fan of historical fictions. The historical fictions I have picked up, I've felt quite lukewarm towards them. Almost all of them have received a 4 or 3 star rating, so I did not think I would ever pick this book up. And then, on a whim, I don't know, out of nowhere, I ended up getting the ebook, and I started reading it, and I couldn't stop. Like, I was completely hooked from the beginning, and I was like, I can't stop reading it, like, now. Like, I need to know what happens. Also, this is a book by 3 authors, which I thought would be really chaotic, but it really isn't. And reading this book just made me envy the authors for having the experience of writing it. Because it's so much fun, like, the things that happen, honestly. Now, if you don't know what My Lady Jane is, it's a historical fiction, sort of a retelling of some of the more famous stories in history. And in My Lady Jane, we follow the Lady Jane Grey. She was forced to marry a noble, and she ends up becoming queen for 9 days, and yeah, that's the history, right? But then these authors take it to a whole other level. In the world that these authors have created, I can't even say it. In England, there are people who can turn basically into animals, and they're called Ethians. So the guy that Lady Jane Grey is meant to marry, Lord Dudley, is a horse by day. So from sunrise to sunset, he's a horse, like a full-on horse, and from sunset to sunrise again, he's a human. And she marries him without being told that he's a horse. I don't know how to explain how much fun reading this book is. Also, the dialogue is just hilarious. Obviously, if you're one for very historically accurate retellings, don't read the book. But if you like some fun and you just want to enjoy like an insane book, My Lady Jane. And every other page, I was like, how? Like, every time I read a sentence, I was just like, I just read that. Like, there are some things in this book that are just insane to me. If you haven't read My Lady Jane yet, I highly recommend you check it out. It is so much fun to read. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. Now, you might be wondering, why isn't it a 5 out of 5 stars? There are definitely flaws in the story. There were times where I was like, why is this a 600-page book? Like, it could have been a lot shorter. But at the same time, it was so much fun that, yeah, I really enjoyed it. It was more of a 4.5 star. There you go. The next book I have here is also a graphic novel, and that is The Arrival by Shaun Tan. I gave this a 4 out of 5 star rating. Now, The Arrival is a graphic novel that a lot of my favorite graphic novel artists had recommended. Having seen that, I felt like this is definitely a book I should check out, so I got it as an ebook, and I do not regret reading it. The entirety, so a lot of graphic novels that I've read and that are in the mainstream right now tend to go on a more traditional comic style where they have panels and quite a lot of dialogue as well thrown in there. But The Arrival is told completely in pencil sketches from beginning to end. There is no dialogue, and that itself is so powerful, I feel like, because Shaun Tan he delivers the message so smoothly, even without a single bit of dialogue. The entire book plays out like what you'd expect a silent film to play out. The primary themes of The Arrival are immigration, but it's all set in this utopian world, which is just so interesting. If you've never heard of this book and you're looking for a good graphic novel, I highly recommend you check it out. There's one spread in this book that I absolutely love, and I'll put it up here. and it's when Shantan, he basically depicts the passing of time through just how this one flower germinates and how the flower goes through the seasons. And I thought that was such a beautiful way to depict it. Also, looking at these drawings, I cannot imagine how much time and effort it took to perfect the images and draw them. The next two books I have here also I talked about on my blog, and the first one is Exit West by Mohsin Hamid. I gave this book a 4 out of 5 stars. I originally gave this book a 3-star rating, but as the days went by and just the story of Saeed and Najia did not leave my mind. It was just knocking about in there for so long that I had to up it to 4 stars. Now, if you want a more articulate, a more in-depth review of the book, I will link my Goodreads review as well as my blog post down below. But Exit West was probably one of the most interesting reads I've read in a very long time, because it was so conflicting to some of the most deeply inset morals and principles that I've followed since I was young, or even just now, that I question not just myself but also these characters so much. Having finished the book, I feel like it is one of the most powerful books I have read throughout the year, even though I still maintain that 4-star rating, simply because I do feel like there's a lot in this book. I feel like, I don't know if you guys have noticed this, where a lot of authors do a lot of filler pages where they just set atmosphere, and obviously that's very important so that when you get to a climax or a certain point in the story, all of those pent-up emotions and that atmosphere really does add to those moments. But with Exit West, I do feel like there was a lot of things that happened, a lot of the dialogue that felt very unnecessary, and I feel like for the first like until I hit like the 30th% mark of the book, I was ready to stop reading. I hit like the 30th% mark, and then I got a little more carried away in the story and I kept reading. But until then, I was ready to stop reading. So that's why I couldn't give it a 5 out of 5 star rating. But ultimately, I feel like this is a book that everyone should read to kind of come to your own understanding and opinion of not just the book, of also some of the themes in this book. I think the main themes in this book are immigration and the refugee crisis, what war and the loss of your culture or your home does to your identity. And I also think it's an important book to read about religious identity. And this is a topic that I feel like is seldom breached in a lot of literary books I've read, but Exit West does handle the topic extremely well. The next book I read, which I also have a review of, is Home by Neri Okafor. This is the second book in the Binti trilogy. This I would say I enjoyed way more than I enjoyed Binti. I think I enjoyed this book more simply because of the base that Binti had already set for me. Home is... I can't say much about Home without spoiling Binti. I gave it a 4 out of 5 star ratings. I definitely enjoyed it more than Binti. You should definitely check out this series. Also, these books are extremely short. I think both books are under 200 pages. All 3 books are listed as novellas, so they're all pretty short. If you're looking for shorter reads and you're looking for something impactful, something to keep you thinking, I would recommend the Binti books. So the next book I have here is a novella, and that is The Two Clever Fox by Leigh Bardugo. Now, this is a book in the Grishaverse as well, and it is a short story by Leigh Bardugo. I dare say that Leigh Bardugo does short stories better than her full-length novels. That's quite a bold claim, but I feel like so far in the books, I feel like Six of Crows, which is her more famous series obviously, Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom, the Dregs duology definitely does justice to her novel writing skills, but her short stories just have such a charm. When I read them, I get completely transported. I feel like I'm in some nook in like a snowy forest and I'm getting told a fairy tale by a bonfire. That's how I feel. And The Two Clever Fox has to be probably my favorite of all her short stories I have read. So the next book I have here is a physical copy. Woohoo! Oh no, don't fall apart. And that is... Oh, and I gave The Two Clever Fox a 5 star rating because it very much deserved that 5 star rating. So the next book I have here is Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. Quite a long story behind this actually. And I gave it a 4 out of 5 star rating. Now Big Magic is a book. So here's the thing. I've had Eat, Pray, Love by Elizabeth Gilbert for the longest time, but I've never felt the urge to pick it up. I've always looked at my bookshelf and just glanced over it. Same thing with Big Magic. My sister read Big Magic years and years ago, and when she read it, she told me, I don't think you'll really enjoy this book. And me being very easily influenced, I was like, I don't think I'm gonna enjoy this book. And then I went to Goodreads, and there were a bunch of trusted reviewers that I've been following for a long time who also didn't really enjoy the book. So I thought to myself, I don't think I'll enjoy this book. And then I read it and I really, really loved it. Although I do think there is some merit to all the people who told me that I don't think that they don't think I'd enjoy it. I think if I had read this book at any other point in my life, I would not have enjoyed it. I would probably have stopped reading it or given it like a 2 or 3 star rating. But I read it at a point in my life where I was experiencing, I would say, a lot of creative frustration and quite a stagnant period in my creativity. So this was the perfect read to kind of fortify that. I think a fair warning if you're going into this book, it's written in a very relaxed tone, I would say, and the entire book feels quite whimsical. Now when you read a lot of self-help books, there tends to be quite a bit of structuring, a little bit more of a sense of this is the message we want to give you, take it. But Big Magic is a lot more abstract. It's a lot more like you're just waiting in a pool and it's like, here's messages, you can pick what you want to take. If you don't want to take them, sure. If you want to take all of them, take them. It's a very interesting read. It's almost, I would say, it's very whimsical. I felt like the entire time I was reading it, I was just like, whoa, this feels like a trip. But yeah, this is an interesting read. I do think it has impact, but it also depends on how you approach the book and what you expect from the book. Big Magic. So I got a 4 out of 5 star ratings for all the reasons I just explained. So the next book I have here, low-key want to lower the rating of this book, is Siege and Storm by Leigh Bardugo. So this is the second book in the Shadow and Bone trilogy by Leigh Bardugo. I read this book for so long. How long did I read it? I read it for 9 days, and it's like a 300-page book. A 300-page book would ordinarily take me 2 days. So the fact that I read this for 9 days, it goes to show how slow this book was. Siege and Storm I almost stopped reading the book. I almost decided that I wasn't gonna read the entire series. Yeah, this book really tired me out. I feel like Leigh Bardugo could have really benefited from just marrying the first and the second book into one would have been perfect. I feel like she could have really condensed the story and made it a lot more interesting if she had done that. I feel like Leigh Bardugo set up the story in the beginning for so many things to happen that I was so hyped up and excited for all of these things to be pursued, and then nothing happened, and that really frustrated me and did not make me want to keep reading. I would say the only good part of this book is Sturmhond. I'm not gonna go further than that, but Sturmhond's character, I feel like redeemed it. If it wasn't for Sturmhond, I would have given up for sure on this book. But yeah, am I gonna read the third and last book in the trilogy? Yes, because I feel like I've put in way too much effort into reading these books to give up now. But yeah, we'll see how long it takes me to drag myself back into Alina's head. So the next book I read, which was also a giant reread, was Illuminae by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. This was so much fun to reread. I totally forgot how much I loved and enjoyed this book. It stays at a 5-star rating. I would give it a 6-star rating if I could. Not only is it one of the most beautiful books I have ever seen, It is so much fun to read. It is so unique. The entire book, if you guys haven't heard of Illuminate, the entire book is told in documents. So you get stuff like this, you get stuff like this, you get stuff like this. It's so much fun to reread. The first time I read this, I just was completely blown away and just completely speechless when I finished the book. Reading it for the second time, I'm able to really appreciate how much effort would have gone into creating a book like this, telling a story and conveying emotions and inciting emotions through a medium like this. Honestly, hats off to Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. Now, there was a reason why I decided to reread these books, besides wanting to have fun with these characters again. I'm planning on continuing on with the series. Finally, there's a second and a third book in this trilogy, which is Gemina and Obsidio. They're also beautiful. I, for the longest time, kept pushing off reading Gemina because I wanted a hardback copy of it, but I never ended up purchasing one, either because I couldn't find it or the places I did find it was real bloody expensive. But other than that, I've been just pushing off reading it, and I finally decided to give in and read the books online. So that's why I reread Illuminate, just to give myself a little bit of a memory jog, so when I read Gemina, I'm not completely lost. Don't worry guys, we're finally at the last 2 books in my marathon this month. So the next book I read was The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. Was this an interesting read? Yes, very much so. In fact, I actually did a reading vlog for when I read The Haunting of Hill House. I don't know if I should post it though, so let me know if you guys want to see it. So for those of you who don't know, I'm a scaredy cat, quite a traditional scaredy cat. So reading The Haunting of Hill House was a very huge challenge for me. But nevertheless, I give it a 3 out of 5 star rating. It was okay. But now here's the thing, I was really scared when I was reading it. Like, there was a point in the book where I literally could not keep reading because I was so scared. But after I read it, within like minutes after I kept the book away, I wasn't scared anymore. Like, it was just that initial adrenaline rush, and then I wasn't scared anymore, like at all. Like, the book does not scare me anymore. Like, just looking at it gives me bad vibes, but I'm not scared of it per se. But yeah, The Haunting of Hill House, it was alright. And The Haunting of Hill House is on Netflix now, I believe, as the TV show. I don't plan on watching it. I don't want to be inside Eleanor's head any longer than that book forced me to be in her head. The last book I read was the novella, and that is Little Knife by Leigh Bardugo. Little Knife is a short story in the Grishaverse as well. I really enjoyed Little Knife. It was a reread actually, because I read it with our book club back in Sunway. But yeah, rereading it was interesting, especially knowing the Grishaverse more and the world more. So those are all the books I read in October. I hope you guys enjoyed this. It was fun for me to go back throughout all those books. Well, the weirdest part is I feel like I read these books like months or like a year ago or something. It feels like so long ago, but it was just last month. So yeah, what did you read in October? Let me know down in the comments below. Please do like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Thank you so much. Have a good day. Bye bye.